If you were the judge, how many years would you give a stepmother who forged a dying man's will to steal $50 million from his only daughter? That morning at Thompson and Associates, Seattle's most prestigious law firm, my stepmother Victoria stood before 15 witnesses, waving a document she claimed my father signed 2 weeks before his death. The problem? He'd been in a coma for 3 weeks. She didn't just want my inheritance, she wanted to erase me completely from my father's legacy. Not a penny, not a photo, not even a mention of my name. The board members, shareholders, and relatives all watched as she declared me unworthy of my own father's love. But what Victoria didn't know was that 6 months earlier, my father had secretly recorded his real will on video with state witnesses and his Harvard roommate, attorney James Mitchell. He knew she would try this. He knew she would forge his signature, and he prepared the perfect trap. Hi everyone, I'm Laura Ingram, 32 years old, and this is the story of how my father's video will send my stepmother to federal prison for 8 years. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. 6 months before he died, my father called me to his private office. It was unusual. Robert Ingram rarely summoned anyone without his assistant scheduling it weeks in advance. When I arrived, he looked exhausted, his once powerful frame diminished by the cancer eating away at him. "Laura, you're the only one I can trust completely," he said, gesturing for me to close the door. My father had discovered something troubling. Over the past year, nearly $2 million had been quietly transferred from various company accounts. The signatures were his, but he had no memory of authorizing these transfers. Victoria always handled the documents he signed at home, especially after his first round of chemotherapy left him weak. "The lake house," he said suddenly, his eyes misting. "Your mother loved that place. She painted her best works there, before the accident took her from us." He gripped my hand. "I won't let Victoria take it from you. It's your birthright, not hers." I wanted to ask more questions, but he stood up with surprising energy. "There's something important we need to do right now. Can you drive? We're going to see someone who can help us protect what's yours." As we left his office, I noticed Victoria's car in the parking lot. She wasn't supposed to be at the company today. Through the tinted windows of her Mercedes, I could see her on the phone, gesturing angrily. My father noticed too, and quickened his pace. "We don't have much time," he muttered, and I wondered what exactly he meant. Looking back now, I think he already knew Victoria was planning something. He just didn't know how far she would go. My father directed me to a law office I'd never seen before, Mitchell and Associates, located in a discreet building downtown. James Mitchell had been my father's roommate at Harvard 40 years ago, though I'd never heard his name mentioned at family dinners. "Robert," Mitchell greeted us warmly, but his expression was serious. "Everything is prepared as you requested." The conference room was different from what I expected. Security cameras were visible in every corner, their red lights blinking steadily. A woman I didn't recognize sat at the table. She introduced herself as a state notary public. "Laura," Mitchell began, "your father wants to create something that cannot be challenged, cannot be forged, and cannot be destroyed. We need evidence that's absolutely bulletproof." My father squeezed my shoulder. "What happens in this room today must stay between us until the right moment. Can you promise me that?" I nodded, though I didn't fully understand. Mitchell pulled out professional video equipment and began setting up while the notary arranged official seals and stamps on the table. The whole setup felt like something out of a legal thriller. "We're going to record everything," Mitchell explained. "Video, audio, multiple witnesses, and we'll store copies in 3 separate locations: my office safe, a bank deposit box, and with a third party your father trusts." As they prepared, my father pulled me aside. "If anything happens to me, if Victoria tries anything, you call Mitchell immediately. Don't wait, don't hesitate, just call him." The intensity in his voice scared me. "Dad, what's going on? What aren't you telling me?" He looked toward the door as if expecting someone to burst in. "I can't prove it yet, but I think Victoria is planning something, and I need to protect you before it's too late. 2 weeks after our visit to Mitchell's office, everything changed. Victoria suddenly became my father's primary caregiver, insisting she needed to monitor his medications personally. She hired a private nursing team, people who answered only to her. Family only, the new nurse informed me when I arrived for my daily visit. Mrs. Ingram's orders. I am family, I protested. I'm his daughter. The nurse checked her list. You're not on the approved visitor list, only immediate family members. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her smile cold. Laura, darling, your father needs rest. All these visits are exhausting him. As his wife, I think I know what's best for him. Over the next month, my access to my father became increasingly restricted. Marcus, Victoria's son, was suddenly everywhere, bringing urgent company documents for my father to sign, always when my father was groggy from pain medication. One nurse, Maria, pulled me aside during a shift change. Your father asks for you, she whispered, glancing around nervously. But Mrs. Ingram says you're too busy with your art to come. He doesn't understand why you've abandoned him. That's a lie, I said, my voice rising. I've been here every day. Shh, Maria warned. I could lose my job, but you should know. There have been other visitors. Late at night, people with briefcases and documents. Before I could ask more, Victoria's sharp voice cut through the hallway. Maria, isn't your shift over? The nurse scurried away, and I was left standing in the hallway, barred from my father's room. 3 days later, my father slipped into a deep coma. Victoria called to inform me, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. It happened so suddenly, she said. At least he's not suffering anymore. My father died at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Victoria was the only one present, despite the round-the-clock nursing staff she'd hired. She called me at 3:47 a.m., her voice perfectly composed. Your father passed peacefully in his sleep, she said. I was holding his hand. I rushed to the hospital, but his body had already been moved to the funeral home, one Victoria had selected without consulting me. The attending physician, Dr. Harrison, seemed uncomfortable when I questioned him. His condition deteriorated rapidly, he said, not meeting my eyes. These things happen with cancer patients. But he was stable yesterday, I pressed. The nurses said, Mrs. Ingram made all medical decisions as his healthcare proxy, he interrupted. I'm very sorry for your loss. Victoria had arranged for cremation within 48 hours. When I protested, she produced a document, allegedly signed by my father, requesting immediate cremation with no autopsy. The signature was shaky, barely recognizable. He signed this 2 weeks ago, Victoria claimed, though my father had been comatose for 3 weeks. When I pointed this out, she quickly corrected herself. I meant 3 weeks ago. Grief is affecting my memory. Marcus stood beside her, his expression smug. Mom has all the paperwork in order. Dad told me everything was taken care of. You don't need to worry about any of this, Laura. The funeral was small, private, and rushed. Victoria played the grieving widow perfectly, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. As they lowered the urn into the ground, she leaned close to me. Your father signed a new will, she whispered. You might want to prepare yourself for some changes. I felt my blood run cold, but I kept my face neutral. In my pocket, my phone held Mitchell's number on speed dial. 3 days after the funeral, I received an official letter from Thompson and Associates, the city's most prestigious law firm. The will reading was scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. The letter included a list of required attendees, 15 names including family members, board members, and major shareholders of Ingram Holdings. Victoria had wasted no time. She'd already been calling the board members, preparing them for the transition. Margaret Chen, my father's longtime CFO, called me that evening. Laura, I wanted to give you a heads up, she said carefully. Victoria's been suggesting that your father made some significant changes to his estate planning recently. She seems very confident about the outcome of Friday's reading. I thanked Margaret and immediately called Mitchell. It's happening, I said. I'll be ready, he assured me. Remember, Patience is key. Let them show their hand first. That night, I went through my father's old emails and found something interesting. 3 weeks before he died, when he was supposedly signing this new will, he had been scheduled for surgery. The hospital records showed he'd been under anesthesia for 6 hours that day. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling. I dressed carefully in my best black suit, the one my father had bought me when I graduated from art school. "You look like a CEO," he'd said proudly. The irony wasn't lost on me now. The Thompson and Associates building loomed 30 stories high, all glass and steel. In the elevator, I ran into two board members who awkwardly avoided eye contact. Word had clearly spread about my impending disinheritance. Victoria and Marcus were already in the conference room when I arrived, sitting at the head of the massive mahogany table like they owned the place. Victoria's smile was predatory. "Laura, dear," she purred. "So glad you could make it." The conference room filled quickly. Board members, shareholders, and distant relatives took their seats around the polished mahogany table. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city my father had helped build, his real estate empire visible in the skyline. I chose a seat in the middle, not at the edges where Victoria clearly expected me to sit. She frowned slightly, but said nothing. Marcus lounged next to her, scrolling through his phone as if this was just another boring meeting. "Poor Laura," I heard Cousin Jennifer whisper to her husband. "Robert always said she'd rather paint than work. Guess Victoria's been running things anyway." The board members huddled together, discussing transition plans. Tom Morrison, the COO, kept glancing at me with something like pity. "The company needs stable leadership," he said to his colleague, loud enough for me to hear. "Victoria's been effectively managing things for months." Victoria held court at the head of the table, accepting condolences with practiced grace. "Robert wanted the company to continue thriving," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "He made sure the right people would be in charge." Marcus finally looked up from his phone. "Don't worry," he announced to the room. "Mom and I have big plans for Ingram Holdings. Robert, would be proud." The slip was telling. He'd been calling my father Robert for years, but now suddenly claimed him as Dad. Sandra Thompson entered precisely at 10 a.m., followed by two junior associates carrying boxes of documents. The room fell silent. She was known for her efficiency and absolute discretion, the reason why Seattle's elite trusted her with their estates. "Thank you all for coming," she began, arranging papers before her. "We're here to execute the last will and testament of Robert James Ingram." Sandra Thompson adjusted her glasses and began with practiced formality. "The estate of Robert James Ingram is substantial. Total assets valued at approximately $50 million, including Ingram Holdings, 5 commercial properties, the family residence, the Lake House estate, and various investment portfolios." The room seemed to hold its breath. 50 million was more than most had estimated. I saw Marcus's eyes gleam with anticipation. "I have here the last will and testament of Mr. Ingram, dated 2 years ago, properly witnessed and filed with this office." Thompson held up a bound document. "This supersedes all previous wills and—" "Excuse me," Victoria interrupted, standing gracefully. "There's been a development." Thompson paused, her expression neutral. "Mrs. Ingram?" Victoria reached into her Louis Vuitton bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "I have here a more recent will, dated just 2 weeks before my husband's passing. As you know, the most recent valid will takes precedence." The room erupted in whispers. Thompson's eyebrows rose slightly, the first emotion she'd shown. "May I examine this document?" "Of course." Victoria handed it over with a triumphant smile. "You'll find everything is in order. 2 witnesses, proper notarization, my husband's signature." I remained silent, my hands folded calmly in my lap. Inside my jacket pocket, my fingers touched the edge of the document Mitchell had prepared. Not yet, I told myself. Let her dig her hole deeper. Thompson studied the new will, her face unreadable. "This is quite different from the previous version." "My husband had a change of heart," Victoria said smoothly. He wanted to ensure the company's future was secure. Marcus leaned back in his chair, already celebrating. Like Mom said, Robert knew what was best for everyone. Victoria stood with theatrical precision, commanding the room's attention. My husband was very clear in his final wishes. He recognized that the company needed experienced leadership, not, she glanced at me, artistic experiments. Thompson read from the document. According to this will, dated 2 weeks before Mr. Ingram's death, the entire estate is left to Victoria Ingram and Marcus Wellington, with specific provisions. Victoria receives all company shares, all real estate including the lake house, and all financial assets. Marcus receives a position as executive vice president. The room was dead silent. I wasn't even mentioned. Not a single item, not a dollar, not even a personal memento. There must be some mistake, Margaret Smith spoke up. Robert always said the lake house would go to Laura. Her mother's paintings are still there. Victoria's smile was ice. Robert realized that Laura had no interest in the family legacy. She chose art over business, fantasy over reality. He didn't want to burden her with responsibilities she couldn't handle. The witnesses, Thompson noted, examining the signature page. Bradley Morse and Kevin Liu, both employees of Ingram Holdings. Trusted employees, Victoria confirmed. They happened to be visiting Robert at home that day. He asked them to witness his signature. Marcus couldn't contain himself anymore. Laura, you should probably start making arrangements to move your things out of the lake house. We're planning to renovate immediately. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Even those who'd been prepared for my disinheritance seemed shocked by the completeness of it. Ms. Ingram, Thompson addressed me directly. Do you wish to contest this will? Every eye in the room turned to me. Victoria's expression was triumphant. Marcus smirked, and the others waited to see if I would crumble or explode. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, some pitying, others curious, a few almost eager to witness my breakdown. Tom Morrison cleared his throat. This is unexpected. Robert never indicated such a dramatic change. He looked at me apologetically. Laura, I'm sorry. This must be devastating. Jennifer's whisper to her husband was deliberately audible. I knew she'd regret wasting her time on those paintings. Robert tried to warn her for years. The shareholders exchanged meaningful glances. One of them, David Park, shook his head slowly. Well, I suppose that settles the succession question. Victoria, we'll need to schedule a board meeting to formalize your position as CEO. Monday morning, Victoria said crisply. The company can't afford any uncertainty. I noticed Sandra Thompson studying me carefully. As a veteran estate attorney, she'd probably seen every possible reaction to disinheritance: rage, tears, collapse. My continued silence seemed to intrigue her. Ms. Ingram, Thompson repeated, I need to know if you plan to contest this will. It affects how we proceed. Marcus laughed. Contest it on what grounds? That she deserved something for being born? Face it, Laura. You disappointed him one too many times. Even some of Victoria's allies seemed uncomfortable with Marcus's cruelty. Margaret Smith looked away, her jaw clenched. I finally looked up, meeting Thompson's gaze directly. My voice, when I spoke, was perfectly calm. May I see the will? Thompson hesitated, then slid the document across the table. As I picked it up, I saw Victoria's fingers tighten on her purse. She was watching me like a hawk, looking for any sign of what I might know. Marcus stood up, unable to resist twisting the knife deeper. You know, Laura, Robert told me something interesting a few weeks before he died. He said his biggest regret was letting you waste your potential on finger painting. Marcus, Victoria said softly, but her eyes gleamed with approval. No, Mom, she needs to hear this. He turned back to me. He said watching you throw away every opportunity he gave you was like watching his legacy die before he did. The art gallery that failed, the non-profit that went under, That's enough, Margaret Smith interjected sharply. Marcus ignored her. The truth hurts, doesn't it? While you were playing artist in your studio, Mom and I were here, actually caring for Robert, actually running his company. We earned this. Tom Morrison looked uncomfortable. This feels unnecessary. What's unnecessary, Marcus continued, is pretending Laura ever belonged in this room. Robert knew it. That's why he cut her out completely, not even a token amount. That's how disappointed he was. I set down the will carefully, noting the date again. 2 weeks before my father's death, when he was in a coma. Are you done? I asked Marcus quietly. He smirked. Just getting started. Once we're in charge, there'll be some changes. That artist retreat you wanted to create at the lake house? We're turning it into a private club. Your mother's art studio? That's becoming a wine cellar. Several people gasped at the cruelty of that statement. My mother's studio was legendary. She'd been a renowned painter before her death. Victoria finally intervened. Marcus, that's sufficient. We should maintain some dignity here. But the damage was done. Even those prepared to accept my disinheritance looked disturbed by the viciousness of the attack. For a moment, I felt my composure crack. The mention of my mother's studio, the place where I'd learned to paint at her side, where her easel still stood exactly as she'd left it, made my eyes burn with unshed tears. I could see my father in my mind, weak but determined in Mitchell's office. You're stronger than they know, Laura. Your mother's strength runs through you. The family portrait on the conference room wall caught my eye. It was from better times, my father, my mother, and 5-year-old me at the lake house, before the car accident, before Victoria. When we were whole. Victoria's smile widened as she saw my moment of vulnerability. Oh dear, are you going to cry? How embarrassing. Robert always said you were too emotional for business. My hand instinctively moved to my jacket pocket, feeling the document Mitchell had given me. The paper was solid, real, a lifeline in this storm of cruelty. But I forced my hand away. Not yet. I need a moment, I said, standing up. Running away again? Marcus called out. Typical Laura. I said I need a moment. My voice was steady despite the tears threatening to fall. Unless there's a time limit on grief in this room? Thompson spoke up. Take your time, Ms. Ingram. We'll wait. I walked to the window, ostensibly looking out at the city, but really trying to center myself. In the reflection, I could see Victoria and Marcus exchanging triumphant glances. They thought they'd broken me. Behind me, I heard David Park whisper, "This is brutal. Robert would never have wanted this circus." Are you sure about that? Victoria replied coolly. You didn't see him at the end. He saw things very clearly. I returned to my seat as Thompson put on her reading glasses, examining the will more carefully. The room watched her with anticipation. The signature, she murmured, comparing it to the original will from 2 years ago. There are some variations, though that could be explained by Mr. Ingram's illness. His hands were weak from the medication, Victoria said quickly. But his mind was perfectly clear that day. You can ask the witnesses. Thompson looked up. Bradley Morse and Kevin Liu, are they present? They're both traveling on company business, Victoria replied smoothly. But I have their sworn affidavits here. She produced 2 more documents from her bag. Margaret Smith frowned. Convenient that both witnesses are unavailable. Not convenient scheduled, Victoria shot back. The Tokyo merger requires their presence. Surely you knew that, Margaret, as CFO? Thompson continued her examination. The notary seal appears genuine. Rebecca Torres, she's a licensed notary in Washington State. She paused. Though I notice she's also an employee of Ingram Holdings. Is there a law against employees being notaries? Marcus asked defensively. No, Thompson admitted. It's just unusual for such a significant document to be witnessed entirely by company employees under the beneficiary's supervision. The room stirred uneasily. Tom Morrison spoke up. Sandra, are you suggesting there's something irregular here? Thompson chose her words carefully. I'm simply noting the circumstances. The will appears to be legally executed, but the context is interesting. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. Are you questioning my integrity? My husband was dying. We used whoever was available. Would you prefer he died without updating his wishes? I prefer, Thompson said coolly, that everything be above reproach when $50 million is at stake. David Park, the lead shareholder, stood up with obvious impatience. Look, this is all very dramatic, but we have a company to think about. The markets don't care about family squabbles. Several other shareholders nodded in agreement. Johnson, who controlled 15% of the company, added, "We need leadership stability. If Victoria has the legal documentation, then let's move forward." The stock price has already dropped 3% this week on uncertainty. Another shareholder chimed in. Every day we delay costs us millions. Park turned to me with what he probably thought was kindness. Laura, I respect your father's memory, but facts are facts. If you have no legal claim, perhaps we could arrange a severance package. Call it a goodwill gesture. Say, 200,000? Enough to pursue your art without financial worry. That's generous, Marcus scoffed. More than she deserves. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. That could work. It would show we're not heartless, and Laura could sign a document agreeing not to contest anything. The business vultures were circling, ready to pick the bones clean. They didn't care about justice or my father's true wishes, only their portfolios. Margaret Smith looked disgusted. We're talking about Robert's daughter, not some terminated employee. Emotion has no place in business, Park replied coldly. Robert would understand that better than anyone. Thompson interrupted the growing argument. Before we discuss settlements, Ms. Ingram hasn't answered whether she plans to contest the will. Everyone turned to me again. Victoria leaned forward, her voice honeyed with false concern. Laura, dear, think carefully. Legal battles are expensive and painful. Take the offer and move on with your life. Wait, I said finally. I have something to say. Before I continue with what happened next, if you've ever been betrayed by family or faced injustice from those who should protect you, please share your story in the comments. Your experiences matter. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss how this confrontation ends. Do you think Victoria really forged the will? Type yes or no below. Now, back to that conference room where everything was about to change. I stood up slowly, my voice cutting through the chaos. Victoria, you said my father signed this will 2 weeks before he died. Can you tell me the exact date? She consulted the document. October 15th, at 3 p.m. At home? Yes, in his study. He was having one of his good days. Her response was practiced, too smooth. I pulled out my phone. That's interesting, because I have here an email from Dr. Harrison dated October 14th, confirming that my father entered a deep coma that morning and never regained consciousness. The room went silent. Victoria's face flushed. You're mistaken. He woke up briefly. The nurses can confirm. Which nurses? I asked. Maria? She was fired the day before. Jennifer? She was reassigned to another patient. Or do you mean the new nurses you hired, the ones who wouldn't let me see him? Marcus jumped in. The doctors said he had moments of lucidity. Mom said? Thompson caught the slip immediately. Mr. Wellington, were you present when this will was signed? No, but... Then please don't testify to events you didn't witness. Thompson's voice was sharp. Margaret Smith pulled out her tablet. I can check the hospital records. We have access through the company insurance system. She typed rapidly. Here. Robert Ingram. Admitted October 14th at 2 a.m. comatose state. No recorded consciousness until death on October 29th. Victoria stood abruptly. Hospital records can be wrong. He was conscious enough to sign. The witnesses saw him. The witnesses who conveniently work for you and are conveniently out of the country, I said calmly. Tell me, Victoria, how much did you pay them? How dare you? But her voice cracked, and everyone heard it. Thompson held up the signature page, comparing it to several other documents. I've seen Mr. Ingram's signature hundreds of times over the years. This one, she trailed off, pulling out a magnifying glass. What about it? Victoria demanded, her knuckles white as she gripped the table. The pressure is inconsistent. See these letters? They're shaky in a different way than his usual tremor from the medication. It's as if someone was guiding his hand, or tracing. Tom Morrison leaned in to look. My God, you're right. I signed contracts with Robert for 20 years. This isn't how he wrote his R. He always had that distinctive loop. Victoria's composure cracked further. You're all being ridiculous. He was dying. Of course his signature looked different. Marcus made a fatal error. Mom said we needed to be careful about the signature. He stopped abruptly, realizing what he'd just revealed. The room erupted. David Park stood up. Mrs. Ingram, are you telling us this will might be forged? Absolutely not. Victoria's voice rose to near hysteria. My husband wanted to protect his company from, she pointed at me, from her incompetence. Thompson's voice was steel. Mrs. Ingram, I need to ask you directly. Did Robert Ingram sign this will of his own free will while conscious? Yes, Victoria shouted, but her eyes darted to the door like a trapped animal. Margaret Smith had been typing furiously. Wait, there's more. Rebecca Torres, the notary? She was terminated from Ingram Holdings on October 16th, the day after this will was supposedly signed. Her exit interview says terminated for ethics violations. That's unrelated, Victoria protested, but sweat beaded on her forehead. Is it? I asked quietly. Or did she grow a conscience? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed manila envelope. The room seemed to hold its breath as I stood and walked slowly to Thompson's position at the head of the table. Ms. Thompson, I'd like you to review this document. Victoria's face drained of color. What is that? What are you doing? I didn't answer her, keeping my eyes on Thompson as I handed over the envelope. Marcus lunged forward, trying to grab it. Let me see that. Thompson pulled it away from his reach. Mr. Wellington, please sit down or I'll call security. It's probably fake, Marcus shouted. She's had weeks to fabricate something. Then you have nothing to worry about, I said calmly, returning to my seat. Thompson broke the seal and pulled out several documents. Her eyebrows rose as she read the cover letter. This is from Mitchell and Associates. James Mitchell? David Park asked. He's one of the most respected estate attorneys in the state. Victoria's hands trembled. This is ambush tactics. We should have been informed of any additional documents. Like you informed us about your new will? Margaret Smith interrupted. Thompson continued reading, her expression growing more intrigued by the second. This is extraordinary. What is it? Several people asked simultaneously. Thompson looked up at me. Ms. Ingram, do you authorize me to share this with everyone present? I do. Victoria stood abruptly. I need to call my lawyer. Sit down, Mrs. Ingram, Thompson commanded. If this document is what I think it is, you'll want to hear it. The tension in the room was electric. Marcus had gone pale, mirroring his mother's complexion. The shareholders leaned forward, sensing a dramatic shift in the proceedings. Thompson cleared her throat. This is a notarized affidavit regarding a video will created by Robert Ingram on April 10th, 6 months before his death. The room exploded. Victoria shot to her feet. That's impossible. Video wills aren't even legal in Washington. They are when properly executed with witnesses and notarization, Thompson corrected. And according to this, Mr. Ingram followed every legal requirement. The video was recorded in the presence of James Mitchell, an estate notary public, with 2 additional independent witnesses. She continued reading. The video is stored in 3 secure locations: Mitchell's office safe, a bank deposit box at First National, and with a third-party digital escrow service. The document includes access codes and verification procedures. Marcus grabbed his mother's arm. You said there were no other wills. Victoria shook him off. This is a fabrication. Laura and this Mitchell person conspired. James Mitchell was Robert's Harvard roommate, Tom Morrison interrupted. They've been friends for 40 years. If Robert trusted anyone besides family, it would be Jim. Thompson held up another page. There's more. The affidavit includes still frames from the video showing Mr. Ingram clearly alert and speaking, with a newspaper visible showing the date. The entire recording is time-stamped and digitally certified. "When can we see this video?" David Park demanded. Thompson looked at the instructions. "The access codes are here. We can view it immediately if everyone agrees." "No!" Victoria shouted. "This is illegal! I demand my lawyer be present." "You're welcome to call them," Thompson said coolly. "But as executor of the estate, I have the authority to review all relevant documents. This video will be played." Victoria sank into her chair, her face ashen. Marcus looked like he might be sick. Victoria's desperation transformed into rage. She stood again, pointing an accusatory finger at me. "This is what she does. She manipulated him when he was vulnerable." 6 months ago, he was still working full-time, Margaret Smith pointed out. "He was sick! On medication! She probably drugged him to make this video." Victoria's voice grew shrill. "Laura's always been jealous of my relationship with Robert. She couldn't stand that he found happiness after her mother died." "That's enough," I said quietly, but Victoria was beyond stopping. "She's a failure who leached off her father's success. Every project he funded for her collapsed. The art gallery, the nonprofit, everything. And now she's stealing from his real family." "Real family?" I stood, my calm finally cracking. "You mean the family that wouldn't let me see him as he died? The family that isolated him from everyone who truly cared?" Marcus jumped in, desperate to support his mother. "We're going to sue. This video is coercion. Elder abuse. We'll tie this up in court for years." "On what grounds?" Thompson asked. "That a man created a legal will while competent?" "He wasn't competent," Victoria screamed. "He was dying. Laura took advantage." "I have his medical records from April," Margaret announced, still working on her tablet. "Cognitive function normal, no signs of impairment. Dr. Harrison's notes say, patient alert and decision-making capacity intact." Victoria grabbed her purse. "We're leaving. Come on, Marcus." "Sit down," Thompson commanded. "We're not finished, and Mrs. Ingram, attempting to leave now, could be construed as consciousness of guilt." "Guilt of what?" Victoria snarled. "That remains to be seen," Thompson replied ominously. "Now, shall we watch the video?" Thompson connected her laptop to the conference room's large screen. The IT technician who'd been called in helped her input the complex access codes from Mitchell's document. "This is a mistake," Victoria said, her voice now pleading. "Please, can we discuss this privately first?" "There's nothing private about a will reading with 15 witnesses," Thompson replied, typing in the final code. The screen flickered to life, showing a loading screen from the secure digital escrow service. Multiple authentication steps appeared: passwords, security questions, biometric verification through Thompson's phone. Marcus paced behind his mother's chair. "This is taking too long. It's probably fake." "Quiet," several board members said in unison. Finally, the video file appeared. Thompson clicked play, and the room fell absolutely silent. The screen showed a well-lit conference room, clearly Mitchell's office. The camera captured my father sitting upright in a leather chair, wearing his favorite navy suit. He looked thin but alert, his eyes clear and focused. Next to him sat James Mitchell, and across the table, a woman in official attire, the state notary. "This can't be real," Victoria whispered, but her protest sounded hollow. The timestamp in the corner read, April 10th, 2024, 2:00 p.m. A copy of the Seattle Times was clearly visible on the table, the date readable even from our distance. My father began to speak, his voice stronger than it had been in his final months. "I am Robert James Ingram, and I am recording this video will on April 10th, 2024, in the presence of my attorney, James Mitchell, and State Notary Public, Linda Harrison." Victoria gripped the table edge so hard her knuckles went white. The moment of truth had arrived. My father's image filled the screen, dignified despite his illness. "I am of sound mind and body, making this will of my own free will, without coercion or undue influence." James Mitchell spoke from beside him. "Robert, Please state for the record whether anyone has pressured you to make this will. No one has pressured me. In fact, I've taken great care to ensure certain people don't know about this recording. His eyes hardened. I have reasons to believe my current will may be tampered with after I become incapacitated. Gasps echoed through the conference room. Victoria stood to leave, but Tom Morrison blocked her path. You need to see this, Victoria. On screen, the notary spoke. Mr. Ingram, please present your identification. My father held up his driver's license and passport to the camera, both clearly visible. Now, my father continued, I want to be absolutely clear about my wishes. This video will serve as my final testament, superseding all others, particularly any documents that may surface after I lose consciousness. Mitchell added, Robert, why are you taking these precautions? My father's jaw tightened. Because I've discovered irregularities in my financial accounts. Money has been moved without my authorization. Documents have been signed that I don't remember signing. My wife Victoria has been limiting my access to my own lawyers and financial advisors. That's a lie, Victoria shouted at the screen, but no one was listening to her anymore. I fear, my father continued, that once I'm too weak to resist, false documents may be created. That's why I'm recording this will now, while I'm still able to protect my daughter Laura's inheritance. Marcus slumped in his chair. The game was over, and everyone in the room knew it. My father adjusted his glasses and pulled out a prepared statement. I, Robert James Ingram, hereby declare my last will and testament. To my daughter, Laura Elizabeth Ingram, I leave the Lake House estate and all its contents, including her mother's art collection and studio. This property may never be sold outside the family. It's her heritage. Several people in the room nodded approvingly. The lake house was worth at least $8 million. Additionally, Laura receives 40% of my shares in Ingram Holdings, giving her the largest individual stake and effective control of the company. The shareholders exchanged shocked glances. 40% meant Laura would be the deciding vote in all major decisions. To my wife, Victoria Ingram, I leave the Seattle mansion where she currently resides and $500,000 in cash. This is more than generous considering she's already transferred $2 million from our accounts without my permission. Victoria's gasp was audible even over the video. To Marcus Wellington, my stepson, I leave $200,000 for educational purposes only, to be distributed by the trustee upon proof of enrollment in accredited institutions. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped, from expecting millions to receiving a conditional education fund. The remaining assets, approximately $20 million, will be divided as follows. $5 million to establish the Catherine Ingram Memorial Art Foundation in honor of Laura's mother. $5 million distributed among employees who've served the company for over 5 years, and the remainder to various charities listed in Appendix A. My father looked directly at the camera. Laura is the only person in my family who chose integrity over greed, art over avarice, truth over manipulation. She deserves to carry on the real Ingram legacy. My father's expression softened on the screen. Laura, my dear daughter, I need to explain why I'm doing this, and why I've kept it secret even from you. I felt tears rolling down my cheeks as his familiar voice filled the room. Your stepmother has shown her true nature these past months. As my illness progressed, she's become bolder. She thinks I don't notice the missing money, the documents she slides in front of me when I'm medicated, the way she's isolated me from everyone who might protect me. He paused, clearly emotional. But what hurts most is how she's treated you, telling you I'm disappointed in your art career, preventing your visits, poisoning our relationship. The truth is, Laura, you're the only one who inherited your mother's genuine soul. Your art gallery didn't fail. Victoria sabotaged the funding. Your nonprofit didn't collapse. She had Marcus spread rumors to donors. Shocked murmurs rippled through the room. I stared at Victoria, who'd gone completely white. I'm ashamed, my father continued, that I didn't see it sooner, that I let loneliness after your mother's death cloud my judgment. Victoria played the grieving widow so well, seemed to understand my pain. By the time I realized she'd married me for money, it was too late. He looked directly at the camera, as if seeing me. Laura, you chose to live authentically, even when it would have been easier to play corporate games. Your mother would be so proud. The lake house is where she painted her masterpieces, where you learned to hold a brush. Keep it alive with art and beauty, not greed and schemes. I love you, sweetheart. Be strong. And know that your father sees you for who you truly are. Mitchell spoke on screen. Robert, please explain the protective provisions you've included. My father's expression turned stern. I've included several safeguards. First, if any will surface as claiming to supersede this one, particularly if dated during my final hospitalization, it should be considered fraudulent unless it references this video will by its specific case number, VWW 2024 RJI 4810. Thompson paused the video to check the documents. The will Victoria presented makes no mention of any video or case number. Continue playing it, David Park demanded. My father continued. Second, if Victoria or Marcus contest this, will or attempt to claim assets through any other document, they forfeit all inheritance rights completely. Everything would transfer to Laura. Third, I'm establishing that any document I sign after entering hospice or while on morphine-level pain medication is invalid unless witnessed by James Mitchell personally. The notary added, Mr. Ingram, what about potential claims of undue influence? That's why we're recording this months before my condition deteriorates. Dr. Harrison has provided a cognitive assessment from yesterday confirming my mental capacity. It's attached as Exhibit B. Mitchell held up a document to the camera. This assessment confirms Mr. Ingram is fully competent, scoring 30 out of 30 on the cognitive evaluation. Finally, my father said, I've had a private investigator document Victoria's financial misconduct. That report is Exhibit C. If she challenges this will, that report goes to the district attorney. Victoria stumbled backward, Marcus catching her arm. The threat was clear. Challenge the will and face criminal prosecution. I've thought of everything, my father said with grim satisfaction. No one will steal my daughter's inheritance. No one will destroy what Catherine and I built together. As the video ended with my father's final signature and the witnesses signing in turn, Victoria collapsed into her chair, shaking uncontrollably. Her carefully constructed facade had completely crumbled. This can't be legal, she stammered. He was sick, paranoid. He seemed perfectly lucid to me, Thompson said, closing her laptop. More importantly, this video will predate your document by 6 months and includes provisions that specifically invalidate your will. Marcus tried one last desperate attempt. We'll fight this. That video could be deep-faked or… Mr. Wellington, Thompson cut him off. Are you really suggesting that James Mitchell, one of the most respected attorneys in Washington, would risk his career on a fake video? Besides, the digital authentication is irrefutable. The shareholders had seen enough. David Park stood up. I motion to recognize Laura Ingram as the rightful inheritor of Robert Ingram's 40% stake in Ingram Holdings. Seconded, 3 board members said simultaneously. All in favor? Every hand rose except Victoria's and Marcus's. Margaret Smith turned to Victoria with barely concealed disgust. You need to vacate the CEO office immediately. Laura is now the controlling shareholder. Victoria's hands trembled as she reached for her purse. I need my lawyer. You'll need more than that, Thompson said gravely. Mrs. Ingram, this forged will constitutes fraud, forgery, and attempted grand larceny. I'm obligated to report this to the authorities. No! Victoria stood abruptly, her chair falling backward. You don't understand. I earned this. 10 years of putting up with his demands, his moods, his constant talk about his precious first wife. Mother, stop talking! Marcus grabbed her arm, finally understanding the legal jeopardy they faced. Sandra Thompson stood, commanding the room's attention. Based on the evidence presented, I hereby declare the will dated October 15th fraudulent and invalid. The video will of Robert James Ingram, dated April 10th, stands as his true last testament. The room erupted in movement. Board members rose to congratulate me, their earlier coldness replaced with respect and perhaps a touch of fear. I now controlled their company. "Laura, I apologize," Tom Morrison said, extending his hand. "We should have known Robert would never cut you out completely. Welcome to your rightful place." David Park approached more carefully. "Ms. Ingram, we'll need to schedule a board meeting to formalize your position. As the largest shareholder, you'll have significant input on the CEO selection." "Or she could take the position herself," Margaret Smith suggested. "She has her MBA from Wharton after all." Victoria tried to slip toward the door, but Thompson's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Ingram, please remain. The authorities will want to speak with you." "Congratulations, Ms. Ingram," Thompson said to me formally. "Your father would be proud. He protected you even from beyond the grave." The other relatives who'd been silent throughout the drama suddenly found their voices, offering congratulations and support. Jennifer, who'd whispered about my failures earlier, now gushed about how she'd always known I was Robert's favorite. Marcus stood frozen, watching his mother unravel and his expected fortune evaporate. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Yes, it is," I said quietly but firmly. "And if you try to contest this will, remember what my father said. You'll lose even the education fund." The power in the room had completely shifted. I was no longer the disinherited artist's daughter. I was Laura Ingram, majority shareholder and heir to an empire. Thompson pulled out her phone and made a call. "Detective Morrison? This is Sandra Thompson at Thompson & Associates. We have a situation requiring immediate attention. Suspected forgery and fraud involving a $50 million estate." Victoria's legs gave out. She slumped against the wall, mascara streaming down her cheeks. "Please, we can work this out privately." "It's too late for that," Thompson said coldly. "You presented fraudulent documents in an official proceeding. That's a felony." Within 15 minutes, 2 detectives arrived. Detective Morrison, a stern woman in her 50s, surveyed the room. "I understand there's been an attempted fraud." Thompson handed over both wills and the video documentation. "The deceased was in a coma when this allegedly newer will was signed. The witnesses are conveniently unavailable, and the notary was fired for ethics violations the day after." Detective Morrison examined the documents. "Mrs. Ingram, you'll need to come with us for questioning." "I want my lawyer," Victoria shrieked. "You can call them from the station." The detective turned to Marcus. "Mr. Wellington, we'll need to speak with you as well. Don't leave town." As they led Victoria away in handcuffs, she turned back to me with pure hatred. "You planned this. You and your father conspired." "My father protected me," I said calmly. "Something you never understood about real love. It doesn't die with the person." The remaining crowd watched in stunned silence as Victoria was escorted out. Marcus followed, trying to call lawyers on his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely dial. Margaret Smith shook her head. "In my 30 years with this company, I've never seen anything like this." "Robert always was 10 steps ahead," Tom Morrison added admiringly. As the authorities began their investigation, more disturbing facts emerged. Margaret Smith, now working directly with the forensic accountants, discovered the extent of Victoria's embezzlement. "Laura, you need to see this," she said, pulling me aside a week later. "The $2 million your father mentioned? That was just the tip. We found offshore accounts, shell companies, systematic theft totaling nearly $5 million over 3 years. But the worst revelation came from Maria, the nurse who'd been fired. She came forward to the police with crucial information. Mrs. Ingram was giving him extra medication, Maria testified in a recorded statement I later saw. Drugs that weren't prescribed that increased his confusion. I tried to report it, but she had me fired before I could. Detective Morrison called me with updates. "We're considering additional charges. The medical examiner wants to exhume your father's body." "Do whatever necessary," I told her. "He deserves justice." The investigation revealed Victoria had been planning this for months. She'd researched how to forge signatures, had Marcus scout for corruptible employees, and systematically isolated my father from anyone who might protect him. Dr. Harrison, when questioned, admitted he'd had concerns. The rapid deterioration didn't match his cancer progression, but Mrs. Ingram was so insistent about no autopsy, and she had medical power of attorney. The security footage from the house, which Victoria thought had been erased, was recovered from a cloud backup. It showed her and Marcus practicing my father's signature late at night in his study. "This isn't just fraud," Detective Morrison told me. "We're looking at elder abuse, possibly attempted murder. The medications she gave him could have accelerated his death." The media got wind of the story. "Heiress exposes stepmother's murder plot" ran in the Seattle Times. The Monday after the will reading, I walked into Ingram Holdings for the first time as majority shareholder. The reception was overwhelming. Susan Chen, the head of development, who'd worked with my father for 20 years, was waiting in the lobby with dozens of employees. "Laura, we're so relieved. We knew something was wrong these past months." Victoria was bleeding the company dry, Susan explained, as we walked to the executive floor. Fake consulting fees, inflated expenses, family members on payroll who never showed up. We documented everything, but were too scared to act. The accounting team presented their own investigation. "We estimate she cost the company $15 million in bad decisions and theft," the CFO reported. "Your father's illness was the only thing preventing him from seeing it." Employee after employee shared stories. Victoria had created a culture of fear, threatening termination for anyone who questioned her. Marcus had harassed female employees, knowing his mother would protect him. "Your father would be horrified," Tom Morrison said. "He built this company on integrity." I called an all-hands meeting that afternoon. For 300 employees, I felt my father's presence. "The corruption ends now," I announced. "We're implementing new oversight measures, restoring the benefits Victoria cut, and promoting from within based on merit, not nepotism." The applause was genuine. These people had loved my father and suffered under Victoria's reign. "We're also establishing the Robert Ingram Excellence Fund," I continued, "providing educational opportunities for all employees' children." My father believed in investing in people, not offshore accounts. Susan approached afterward with tears in her eyes. "Your father would be so proud. You're more like him than you know." "No," I replied. "I'm like both my parents, his business acumen and my mother's artistic soul." 3 weeks into the investigation, Marcus cracked. Facing potential conspiracy charges and 20 years in prison, he made a deal with prosecutors. Detective Morrison called me to her office. "Marcus Wellington wants to cooperate. He's offering full testimony against his mother in exchange for a reduced sentence." I wasn't surprised. Marcus had always been weak, following wherever he thought power lay. In his recorded confession, which I was allowed to observe, Marcus revealed the full extent of the scheme. "It started 2 years ago when Robert was first diagnosed. Mom said we needed to secure our future before he became too ill to manipulate." He detailed how Victoria had researched untraceable drugs that would increase confusion, how she'd practiced forging signatures for months, how she'd identified employees desperate enough to cooperate. The notary, Rebecca Torres, owed gambling debts. Mom paid them in exchange for the false notarization. The witnesses, Bradley and Kevin, each got $50,000 to lie. "What about the night Robert died?" Detective Morrison pressed. Marcus went pale. "Mom was alone with him. She said she gave him something to help him pass peacefully. I didn't ask details." The revelation sent shockwaves through the case. This was no longer just fraud. It was murder. "She told me Laura was trying to steal everything," Marcus continued, trying to justify himself. "That we deserved it for taking care of him, but I see now she was the thief." When asked why he was confessing, Marcus's answer was pathetically honest. "Because I know Laura won. She has the power now. And maybe I want to do one right thing. Robert was kind to me before Mom poisoned everything." His testimony would ensure Victoria's conviction, but it couldn't undo the damage done. Victoria's crimes were finally exposed, and justice was coming. If you've ever stood up to corruption in your family or workplace, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Your courage matters. Please hit the like button if you believe truth always wins in the end, and subscribe for more stories about justice prevailing. Ring the notification bell so you don't miss what happened at Victoria's trial. Now let me tell you about reclaiming my father's legacy. The first time I returned to the lake house after 5 years, I could barely breathe. Victoria had banned me after convincing my father I'd tried to sell it behind his back. Another lie in her web of deception. The main house was exactly as I remembered, but walking into my mother's studio broke me. My father had preserved everything. Her easel still held her last unfinished painting, a landscape of the lake at sunset. Her brushes were cleaned and arranged just as she'd left them 15 years ago. On the table was an envelope with my name in my father's handwriting. Inside, a letter dated just a month before he died. My dearest Laura, if you're reading this, it means the plan worked. I knew Victoria would try to steal everything, so I've been playing a longer game. The studio is exactly as your mother left it because I knew you'd return here someday. This was always meant to be yours. Create beauty here, as she did. Love, Dad. I collapsed in tears, finally understanding the depth of his protection. He'd known all along what Victoria was, but needed to gather evidence while appearing oblivious. Over the next month, I restored the lake house with reverence. The main house became a retreat for artists, offering residencies to emerging talent. My mother's studio became a teaching space where I held workshops for underprivileged youth. This is what Dad really wanted, I told Margaret when she visited. Not just preserving wealth, but creating something meaningful. The house came alive again with art and purpose. Every weekend, children learned to paint where my mother had created masterpieces. It was the perfect tribute to both my parents, my mother's artistic legacy and my father's generous spirit. 6 months later, I visited Victoria at the county jail where she awaited trial. She'd aged 10 years, her perfect facade replaced by gray roots and orange jumpsuit. "Come to gloat?" she asked bitterly through the reinforced glass. "No, I came to understand." I studied the woman who'd destroyed so much. Why wasn't the 500,000 enough? Why did you need everything? Victoria's laugh was hollow. You really don't get it, do you? It was never about money. It was about winning. About proving I was better than your perfect mother's memory. She's been dead for 15 years, but never gone. Victoria's composure cracked. Every day, Robert compared me to her. Catherine would have loved this. Catherine painted that view. Catherine, 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 I was competing with a ghost. For a moment, I almost pitied her. So you decided to destroy everything they built? I decided to take what I deserved for enduring 10 years in her shadow. Victoria's eyes hardened again. Your father never loved me. He loved the idea of not being alone. Maybe that's true, I admitted, but that didn't give you the right to kill him. I didn't. She stopped, her lawyer having advised her not to discuss the murder charges. I forgive you, I said, standing to leave. Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying hatred would make me like you, and that's not who my parents raised me to be. I don't want your forgiveness. I know. That's why you need it most. I walked away, knowing I'd never see her again. As the guard led her back to her cell, I heard her screaming about appeals and injustice. But I was already free, walking toward a future she'd never touch again. Within a year of taking control, Ingram Holdings transformed completely. I didn't become CEO. I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I promoted Susan Smith from within, someone who'd earned it through decades of dedication. Your father always said Susan should run things, Tom Morrison told the board. Victoria blocked it because Susan wouldn't play her games. Under Susan's leadership and my oversight as majority shareholder, the company flourished. We implemented profit sharing that my father had always talked about, but Victoria had vetoed. Employee satisfaction soared. Revenue is up 30%, Susan reported at the year-end board meeting. Turns out, when people feel valued, they work harder. Who knew? The sarcasm aimed at Victoria's management style wasn't subtle. We also launched the Ingram Foundation properly, not the tax shelter Victoria had created. $5 million annually went to arts education and supporting young entrepreneurs, combining both my parents' passions. We're also divesting from the questionable ventures Victoria initiated, Margaret reported. The casino development, the payday loan company. Robert would never have approved these. The best moment came when we rehired the employees Victoria had vindictively fired. Maria, the nurse who'd tried to protect my father, became our head of corporate wellness. Rebecca Torres, the notary who'd been coerced, got a second chance in our legal department after testifying against Victoria. Everyone deserves redemption, I told the board when they questioned hiring Rebecca. She made a mistake under duress and owned up to it. That takes courage. The company my father built was finally honoring his values again. At the annual memorial we established for him, employees shared stories of his kindness and vision. He'd be proud, Susan said, watching the full auditorium. You saved his legacy, Laura. No, I corrected. He saved it himself through that video will. A year after the trial, Marcus wrote me a letter from his minimum security facility where he served 18 months for conspiracy to commit fraud, his deal for testifying against Victoria. Laura, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Not just because I got caught, but because I see now what we destroyed. Your father was the only real father figure I ever had, and I betrayed him for money I didn't earn. He went on to describe his time in prison, teaching literacy to other inmates, discovering he actually had a talent for education when it wasn't about manipulating people. I'm planning to use the education fund your father left me to become a teacher. Ironic, right? The guy who sneered at your art wants to teach kids to paint, but maybe that's my penance. When Marcus was released, he reached out for a meeting. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. You look different, I observed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something quieter. Prison does that. He stirred his coffee nervously. Laura, what my mother did, what I helped her do, there's no excuse. No, there isn't. But I want you to know your father talked about you constantly those last months. Even drugged, even confused, he'd ask for you. He'd say, "Where's my artist? Where's my Laura?" It drove Mom crazy. That broke my composure. Tears ran down my face thinking of my father, lost in medication fog, still calling for me. I should have helped him, Marcus continued. Should have called you, should have stopped her. I'm sorry. I studied him for a long moment. Use the education fund well. Become the teacher you're meant to be. That's how you honor his memory. Victoria's trial became Seattle's most watched legal proceeding in a decade. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged documents, embezzlement records, witness testimonies, and most damning, the drugs found in my father's system that she'd administered without prescription. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours, guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, elder abuse, embezzlement, and involuntary manslaughter. The murder charge had been reduced, as prosecutors couldn't prove intent to kill, only reckless endangerment leading to death. Victoria Ingram, the judge pronounced, you betrayed the most sacred trust, that between spouses. You isolated a dying man from his daughter, stole his money, and hastened his death through unauthorized medication. This court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison and orders restitution of $2 million to the estate. Victoria collapsed at the defendant's table. For the first time since this began, she looked genuinely broken. Her lawyer had to support her as they led her away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Ms. Ingram, how do you feel about the verdict? Justice was served, I said simply. But nothing brings my father back. This victory feels hollow without him here to see it. The case set legal precedent in Washington state for elder abuse prosecution. The Ingram standard now required additional scrutiny for last-minute will changes involving terminally ill patients. Detective Morrison shook my hand after the verdict. Your father would be proud. The video will he created didn't just protect you, it's now protecting other vulnerable people from similar schemes. Marcus, who'd testified for the prosecution, found me outside. 8 years, he said quietly. She'll be almost 60 when she gets out. With nothing, I added. Everything she schemed for, gone. Yeah, he agreed. Greed really does destroy everything it touches. A year after the verdict, life had found its rhythm. The lake house hosted its first art exhibition, emerging artists whose work explored themes of family, loss, and redemption. The irony wasn't lost on me. Standing in my mother's former studio, now filled with laughing children learning to paint, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. My father's portrait, painted by one of our resident artists, watched over the room with that knowing smile he'd had in Mitchell's video. The foundation received a record number of applications, Susan reported during her visit. 300 artists want residencies here. The company thrived under ethical leadership. We'd recovered most of the money Victoria stole, using it to fund employee bonuses she'd cut. The staff who'd stood by my father through everything finally got their reward. Your father used to talk about this, Tom Morrison said at the company anniversary gala. He wanted Ingram Holdings to be about more than profit. You've made that dream real. I'd even started painting again, something I'd stopped during the years of family drama. My first piece, a portrait of my parents at the lake house, sold at charity auction for $50,000, all proceeds going to elder abuse prevention. Marcus sent a photo from his classroom. He was teaching art to underprivileged kids in Tacoma. Following your example, his message read, trying to create instead of destroy. Even Margaret, always the pragmatist, admitted the company's transformation exceeded expectations. Your father was right about you, Laura. You did inherit the best of both parents. Standing on the lake house deck at sunset, I raised a glass of my father's favorite whiskey. We did it, Dad. We saved everything that mattered. The lake reflected the setting sun, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, my mother's favorite palette. At a conference on family wealth preservation, I was invited to speak about our ordeal. Standing before 200 wealthy families, I shared the hard truths I'd learned. Boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary, I began. My father's biggest mistake wasn't marrying Victoria, it was ignoring red flags because he didn't want to seem unkind. I outlined the warning signs we'd missed, the isolation tactics, the sudden involvement in finances, the way Victoria had systematically removed my father's longtime advisors. Family doesn't mean unlimited access to your life or assets. Blood relation, or marriage, isn't a free pass to exploit you. The audience leaned in, many nodding in recognition. My father taught me something crucial through his video will. Protecting yourself isn't selfish. He knew Victoria would try to destroy me after his death, so he built a legal fortress around my inheritance. That wasn't paranoid, it was parental love in action. A woman raised her hand. How do you reconcile love with suspicion? You don't have to be suspicious of everyone, I replied, but verify unusual changes. If my father had questioned why Victoria needed him to sign documents while medicated, if he'd insisted on his own lawyer reviewing papers, things might have been different. Trust, but verify. Love, but maintain boundaries. Give, but not everything. These aren't contradictions, they're wisdom. The presentation ended with practical advice, video wills, multiple witnesses, regular reviews with independent lawyers, and most importantly, listening to your instincts when something feels wrong. My father's final gift wasn't just money or property, I concluded. It was showing me that real love protects. It doesn't enable. It doesn't ignore danger. It stands guard, even from beyond the grave. 2 years after his death, we published my father's memoir, discovered in his private files at Mitchell's office. He'd been writing it secretly during his final year, knowing his time was limited. The book, titled Building More Than Buildings, became a bestseller. All proceeds went to the Robert Ingram Scholarship Fund, providing business education for artists and arts education for business students, bridging the gap he'd seen between two worlds. Your father was quite the writer, Mitchell said at the book launch. He wrote extensively about you, Laura, how proud he was that you chose authenticity over easy money. The most moving passage was about my mother. Catherine taught me that success without soul is failure. Our daughter Laura inherited that wisdom. While I built buildings, she builds beauty. Both have their place. The Lake House became the Robert and Catherine Ingram Center for Arts and Innovation. Every summer, 50 young people learned both business and art, understanding they weren't mutually exclusive. Mr. Ingram always believed in synthesis, Susan told the first graduating class. His daughter embodies that. An artist with business acumen, a creator who can also preserve. We established an annual Ingram Award for Ethical Business Leadership. The first recipient was a CEO who'd exposed corruption in his own company, losing millions but saving thousands of pensions. This is what my father stood for, I said at the ceremony. Doing right even when it costs everything. The memorial garden at the lake house grew each year. Employees, artists, students, all planted trees in memory of a man who tried to nurture everything around him. Your father's real legacy isn't the buildings or the money, Margaret observed during a visit. It's the lives he touched, the people he lifted up. And now, through you, that continues. 3 years after everything ended, I received a letter from Victoria in prison. Her handwriting was shaky, the arrogance gone. Laura, I don't expect you to read this, but I need to write it. Prison gives you time to think. I've realized I wasn't competing with your mother's memory. I was competing with my own emptiness. I had nothing real to offer except manipulation, so that's what I gave. She went on to describe her therapy sessions, her work in the prison library, her slow recognition of the monster she'd become. I destroyed the only real family I ever had for money I'll never touch. Your father's love, which I craved, was impossible to win through schemes. You had it simply by being yourself. I hated you for that. But now I understand. Love can't be stolen. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw the letter away either. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or reconnecting. It meant releasing the poison of hatred from my own heart. At my wedding to James, a fellow artist I'd met at the lake house, I felt my parents' presence. My father's empty chair held his portrait and a white rose. During the father-daughter dance, James's father stepped in, but I knew who was really there. You survived, sweetheart, I could almost hear my father say. You're stronger than Victoria ever was because your strength comes from love, not greed. Marcus attended, now a respected teacher, genuinely happy for me. You gave me a second chance I didn't deserve, he said. Thank you. Moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant learning from it, honoring it, but not being imprisoned by it. My father had protected me so I could live fully, not spend my life in bitterness. If you're reading this because you're facing your own family betrayal, know this. You're not crazy for sensing danger, you're not cruel for setting boundaries, and you're not weak for seeking help. My father knew Victoria would try to destroy me, so he created an unbreakable shield through that video will. But most importantly, he showed me that real love protects without conditions, gives without enabling, and sometimes says no to preserve what matters. Document everything. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Don't let guilt override your gut feelings. If someone isolates you from loved ones, that's not care, it's control. If they handle your finances secretly, that's not help. It's theft waiting to happen. Keep your own lawyer, your own accounts, your own support system. Video record important decisions. Store copies in multiple places. These aren't acts of distrust. They're acts of self-preservation. But also remember, not everyone is Victoria. There are genuine, loving people who deserve your trust. The key is learning to distinguish between those who love you and those who love what you have. My father's greatest gift wasn't the 40% of Ingram Holdings or the lake house. It was showing me that integrity beats greed every time, that truth eventually surfaces, and that real love leaves legacies that can't be stolen. Today, the lake house hosts hundreds of artists yearly. The company employs thousands ethically. The foundation has educated countless young people. Victoria sits in prison, while everything she schemed for flourishes in hands that honor its purpose. Truth won, love won, justice was served. And somewhere, I know my father is smiling, knowing his plan worked perfectly, protecting his daughter even from beyond the grave. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're facing injustice from family, remember, you deserve respect and protection. Comment justice. If you believe karma is real, subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to hear that truth always wins. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know below. Until next time, stay strong and always protect what's rightfully yours.